Hey, what's going on, good people? It's Gardner Douglas, your oyster ninja. Dan, I'm just gonna bring you in. Fallen Pine Oyster Farm. But man, you're doing some awesome things. You got a great oyster. I love shucking your salty oyster. Um, how are you today, man?
I'm good. It's maybe getting a little less salty with all this rain, but it's still we got enough salt to go around. So
When you talk about an oyster being less salty because of rain, how is that possible?
like one, the ocean. That's where salt water comes from. Like, we all learned that in elementary and middle school. The Atlantic Ocean holds about 32 parts per thousand salt, and fresh water is zero. So when you start mixing fresh water and salt water, that's where you end up with brackish, that the term brackish water. Most oyster regions in Maryland are grown in the Chesapeake Bay, which is considered a brackish bay. So you got a lot of fresh water coming down, starts at the Susquehanna up in Havre de Grace, and it ends down in Virginia Beach and Norfolk, and you got the ocean coming in from one side, the fresh water coming in from the other. And when you get to that Maryland line, that Maryland Virginia line, you're looking at about half the salt content, so 16 parts per thousand. Um, as you get up to the Bay Bridge, you might be looking at 10 parts per thousand. Now, as you travel down the ocean, as we say in Maryland, as you're headed down the ocean and you cross over 113, you pass away from the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and then you enter into the Maryland Coastal Bay watershed. That is a very small, isolated watershed. So there's very little what's called effluent flow water coming into that bay, but you have the Ocean City Inlet and the Chincoteague Inlet right there. And if you go farther north, it's not really connected, but the Indian River Inlet in Delaware, the ocean's coming in. Think of it as a big river that's real short and wide, but it's just pumping salt water in there. So with that lack of fresh water and that influence of ocean salt, that's where you end up with a salty oyster. Now, let's say it gets hot and it's sunny and there's not a lot of wind going on. Now you got evaporation. So you're lowering the volume of the water. You got no fresh water coming in, and you can even end up with elevated salt levels, and you can get up to 32 and above, to hopefully never over 40, because your oysters will start dying at some point in too salty of a water. And I think that threshold is about 40 parts per thousand. But I know back in our little cove back there, there's sometimes I taste them. I mean, it's just, if you like salt, that like these are the oysters for you. I mean, we really lean into the salt content. It's got the cleanest water in the state of Maryland. If you look up the ratings, we are by far like the cleanest water. The only thing that keeps us from being A-rated water is they just can't find enough what's called a soft clam out there. Uh, but if soft clams came back in that bay, it would be classified as almost pristine, perfect water. And it's just kind of an honor to be working an area like that. It's very unique. It's almost like a microclimate in wine. At least in our region, a lot of nonprofit organizations, environmental nonprofits, will put out report cards. Um, Ours is we have the Maryland Coastal Bays and Assateague Coastal Trust that are responsible for testing a lot of the water out here, and then you got our Department of the Environment. Um, and between those organizations, they collaborate to put together a report card based on nitrogen and phosphorus, chlorophyll levels in the water, seagrasses. They look at the biodiversity of the region, and they put all those criteria together, and that gives you your score, your grade of your waterway. So, if your nitrogen and phosphorus is too high, it lowers your water quality because that leads to your algae blooms. But for us at least, the Maryland Coastal Bays report card is what I'm referring to. Um, and it's neat. I love when it comes out every year. It's like, we work in that water, and to get, that B plus grade and see that we have the highest rated water, that's, I think we should brag about having clean water. I think it's something everybody should strive for, is having clean water, because I mean, you can't go a day without it. And if you don't have clean water, we why even have a podcast?
I like the way you put that. We should brag about clean water. I think I'll put that on a t-shirt next. Uh, I'll give you a 5%. This time that you were on a podcast, we were talking about your mobile oyster company, you being a sommelier or definitely wine trained. And are you a sommelier or you wine? I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, yeah, I barely made it through the certified level, the level 2
Hey,
guild of
look, a
master
win is a win.
sommeliers.
A
Yeah.
win is a win.
If I compare it to, I always compare it to baseball,
Hmm.
where the level 2, you got to hit the fastballs. So a fastball is, they put a Chardonnay from a classic region like Burgundy or California in front of you, and you have to be able to identify that wine. They're not throwing curveballs at you, or they're giving you, like, hey, you got to hit this, and if you don't, you'll never make it to the next levels. So I always describe that certified level as like, I'm just really good at picking a fastball and hitting
Damn, you good with these phrases, man. You good with
it.
these metaphors, guy. Um, no, that's what's up, man. So how did we get from all of that awesomeness? It was a great episode. Into starting an oyster farm, wanting to be an oyster farmer, knowing what it entails, or did you even not know what it entails? And it's like, you know what? I'm gonna try this. How did we get here?
When we did that podcast, I was working for ORP. I had the mobile raw bar, and then I was bartending on the side to make some money. Overnight, no more mobile raw bars because you couldn't have events. No more bartending because all the restaurants were closed. And then my job with ORP was contingent on restaurants being open and recycling the shells from the restaurants. I was living in Baltimore, and my lease was up, I want to say around May. So I ended up moving back in with my parents, at 30 some years old, which is something I never thought I'd do. But, I was living by myself, like in the city. I had a house in the city, and just kind of bored, really. Um, at my parents' house, running every day, going to the park, being outside. My dad had his boat. I'd take that boat out, and a whole nother story. I ran out of gas because there weren't any gas stations open, and I had to pay a ridiculous amount of money to get Towboat US to get me out of the middle of the Chesapeake Bay. But no, a guy I used to buy oysters from, Ryan Murphy, that owned Great Eastern Shellfish. I called him up and was like, "Hey, do you just need help on the farm? I'd love to come down there. It's the middle of nowhere. I'd love to see it." I'd always kind of had this dream of having my own oyster farm. I couldn't imagine my life without trying to do this. I just felt gravitated towards that lifestyle of oyster farming. And looking back now, I don't know why I was so gravitated to it. And I'm not complaining about where we've gotten. It's just, I think if I would have known the journey that I was about to go on, I don't know if I would have made my decisions maybe a little bit differently. But that's kind of the cool part of it. You look back at the ride. But anyway, I go down there, and the first time I show up, it's in the middle of the marsh. It's in the middle of nowhere, past Girdle Tree, Maryland, which most people haven't heard of. I know you're from that area. Like, you know Girdle Tree in Stockton and Greenbackville, Public Landing. It's just this beautiful tucked away place in Maryland. And I mean, the first time I set eyes on that little spot, I was like, man, this is awesome. It started once every 2 weeks. I'd go down there. And then I started thinking, well, the restaurants are opening back up. Maybe I'll bring oysters back up. So I start texting my friends. I start texting people. I'm like, hey, I'm bringing oysters that I harvested. back up, did that for about 3 weeks, and maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot here. I was like, you know what? You probably got to get permits to do this. So for about 3 weeks, I knew what I was doing. I know how to take care of oysters. I wasn't getting anybody sick or nothing, but no, I reached out to the state and got like the certification to make sure I was doing everything on the level. And uh, it got to a point where I was like really moving some oysters. There were a couple places that were getting big orders from me. I was giving them to them at a good price, and then some of these places I'd actually end up like shucking for. So I found this niche of like, hey, I harvested these, now I'm shucking them for you. You're getting the freshest seafood possible, and I was kind of learning the logistics of getting oysters out of the water into people's hands at a time where it wasn't everything wasn't fully open. So it was almost the perfect time to learn. And we got to a point where we were actually outpacing his wholesale buyers. We were, I say we, I was, going down there and moving more oysters than his wholesalers were at times. And I had a couple buddies that would come down with me, and they're getting 6 packs of beer with them, and they got their waders on, and we were like, oh, this is the life. We're working, and I didn't realize we weren't even close to being working yet. But no, that Thanksgiving, I moved a lot of oysters, and I had a conversation with Ryan, and I just asked him, if he'd be willing to sell his farm, and surprisingly, he said yes, and that got the ball rolling on um, just what ended up kind of changing my life really, and that's how I ended up with a farm. So I was able to kind of like, I want to call it a fixer upper, because there was a lot of old equipment out there. It had been there for about 20 years. And I got to work myself backwards from seeing what happens when it's not that Ryan wasn't taking care of the farm. It's just you need orders going out. You have to constantly cycle through your stock, and you got to touch those oysters. But the best way to do that is to sell them. And then the ones that aren't ready for sell, you put back in the water. You either put them in a float, you put them in a bottom cage, or you decide like, all right, maybe I'm just going to give this one back to nature. Maybe we can get in that a little more, but there's actually oysters we call runts that they'll stop growing completely. You'll have an oyster that just rotates through your stock, and it's almost like the third or fourth time you come back through it, you're like, I remember this one. You'll see a million oysters, and I swear you'll come across one that you just remember, and it's wild. Well, it's farm raised, it's not wild.
Ooh, I like that. I'm only asking this question because I'm sure it's burning the listener's imagination. What does an oyster farm cost? You don't have to get in specifics of what you paid, but like, what does a oyster like? Are we talking about like hundreds of thousands of dollars, or is it? It just depends on that particular farm. Like, how do you tell you're not overpaying for a farm, or how can you judge that?
That's a great question. What I would say, if somebody were looking to buy a farm, um, you're really buying the equipment, the processing equipment. You're buying the assets. So, do they have a tumbler? Put a value on that tumbler. How many floats do they have? How many bags do they have? What's their gear type? Is a boat involved? Look at all the assets that you need to produce an oyster. Kind of leave the lease separate, because without your work, that lease, I don't want to say is worth nothing, but it's the processing equipment, because if you can't process oysters from the water to a dock to a walk-in refrigerator, that's another thing. Is there a walk-in refrigerator? Put a price tag on that, add all that together, and that's where you come up with hopefully a mutual purchase price for an oyster farm. And that's kind of the approach that we took. There is in Maryland a shellfish financing loan, which is actually amazing. You can borrow $100,000, and you get 40% of that is forgiven as long as you pay the interest for a couple years. then you make quarterly payments, so you can borrow 100,000 for capital purchases and only pay back 60. Um, and then you find out that that 40,000 is considered income and you got to pay taxes on that 40,000. But that's something I learned just recently.
That hurt. That hurt a little bit.
Yeah. I'm like, what? Like, I didn't get the money. Like, it just, what do you mean it's income?
Right. Oh man, that's great, man. That's a great story, man. What's your earliest memory of oysters?
Um, so have you ever heard of Oyster Seed Holdings down in Virginia?
I definitely feel like I should know it for sure.
It's so they're that's Mike Congrove runs a hatchery down there. It's on Gwynn's Island, Virginia, and that hatchery sits on Callis Wharf Road. On my mom's side of the family, they were Callises, Lewises, and all that. That hatchery, I actually remember as a child. It wasn't a hatchery when I was a kid, but when I went to go visit my great grandmother and great great grandmother, she was still alive up until it's probably about 6 or 7. So I actually met my great great grandparents. Um, they lived on Callis Wharf Road. You had all that down there, and I mean it's the middle of nowhere, Virginia. I mean there is nothing to do. This is before cell phones. You know, Nan, we called her Nan, like didn't have a way for me to set up my PlayStation. You know, like so you had to ride bikes, and I would ride a bike down to that wharf, and they had shells all over there. So like it wasn't really eating them. It was just kind of being a bored kid in the summer times, going down to visit my family and like just throwing oyster shells like in the water. So it's funny that now, like fast forward, I've bought seed from Oyster Seed Holdings. So like the place where my family oystered and crabbed and like they were watermen and lighthouse keepers down there. They were actually lighthouse keepers for Wolf Trap Lighthouse during the war for like the Coast Guard Auxiliary, but just being around that, I don't know, I wasn't immersed in it, but I always felt this draw back to the water. It's like, man, I want to do what they did. I want to work on a lighthouse. I want to work in the water. I want to, you know, live life the way they did because they moved up to Baltimore when they still had the streetcars and ended up being streetcar drivers. My pop was a streetcar driver, and my nan was, I forget what they call them, but there was a lady on the streetcar that would make sure everybody was like behaving and like paying their dues and all that. And there was like a name for them.
Yeah, they
But
also still call those nans. No, I'm just joking.
yeah,
Um,
they, I got the change counter somewhere, like the little change thing you put in the streetcars.
wow, that's cool. What's the auxiliary thing you were talking about? Was it?
Oh, Coast Guard Auxiliary. So you had to put people out on these lighthouses all over the bay, and they had to look out for German U-boats.
Mm.
Because they did come into the Chesapeake Bay. So their job was to, make sure you didn't have German U-boats coming up to attack DC or Baltimore. Um, so it was the Coast Guard Auxiliary. Because they had to work the water and make money and provide for their family, but they could still be a part of the war effort by working on these lighthouses. Because you needed people with boats.
Right, right. That's pretty cool. That's some fun facts. So let's get back to the farm, man. So, how do you grow your oysters?
Um, so you learn honestly, if you work backwards, we got to I got to see what killed oysters. Like you learn how to not let one die.
Are you
The
saying
oysters
you
grow
killed a bunch of
themselves.
oysters? Is that what you're saying? You killed a bunch of
Oh,
oysters then?
yeah, either none of it was ever purposefully, but you make mistakes or you learn how to fix mistakes. An oyster grows itself. You don't have to feed once you get it out of the nursery. You don't have to feed it. It feeds itself. It opens up and the water passes over it. It takes in those nutrients from the algae, takes in chlorophyll, and it processes it and creates its own shell. It's the builder of its own shell. So it's not like a, you know, an animal going from shell to shell. It's not like the meat comes out and then finds a bigger shell and then goes into that shell. It's actually creating its own shell. We get it at about um, anywhere from 10 millimeters, which is, I want to say, like a third of an inch or a quarter inch, up to as big as 2 inches. But as you get bigger in size, seed, it's more expensive. So you really gotta diversify your seed purchases in size, not only size, but who you're getting them from, where you're getting them from, because say one strain is not good with MSX and you get MSX in, but you got another strain that is good, you're diversifying. So your whole crop won't die, hopefully, all in one go. But yeah, you buy seed and we buy about we'd like to get to 2 million a year, which is challenging without a nursery. Maybe that's the next step is building a small little nursery.
So what is this MXX that you speak of that could terminate your whole oyster farm if done wrong?
Well, you got MSX and you got Dermo. Those are the two uh, pandemic level diseases for oysters that'll just wipe them out. They both act a little bit differently. Um, I don't want to get too much into pathology because I know it kills them. I don't know exactly why, but once it kind of it can start in one oyster and it can spread from oyster to oyster. Dermo, they know how it spreads, but the science is still out there on a lot of this. They don't know how MSX. There's a kind of close cousin to it called SSO, seaside organism. I call it salty MSX that we worry about out here. It yeah, those we're still trying to learn more and more about like the pathology of these oyster diseases. Uh, Bill Walton out of Virginia Institute of Marine Science actually has come up with a really cool tool for us farmers, and it's have you ever heard of the Waffle House Index?
Nope.
This is actually pretty cool. So the Waffle House Index is it they use it in federal emergency management, FEMA, where Waffle House doesn't close for anything. So they take a survey of a region and they do green, yellow, or red. Is Waffle House open? Okay. They're getting their food, they're open, they got electricity. Yellow, are they running a limited menu? So that means they're open, but they're maybe can't get supplies. And then if Waffle House closes, you're that's uh that's a bad situation. So they actually use that index to know where to focus on. So Bill Walton took that idea and put it into oyster farm. So every week during the summer, we get a text from him and it sends us to a little link and it goes green, yellow, red. And all summer, thank God, we were able to hit green, maybe a couple yellows. We're getting worried about some stuff, but all summer long we hit green. He compiles that from all over the country by region so that if they start to see die-offs, they can focus their efforts and study on where the oysters are dying. Because when we had our die-off about 2 years ago, it wasn't until October, November, this time of year, that I had some of the agencies and scientists calling me, and my answer to them was kind of like, that was happening months ago. We're past that now. Um, so
So to
it
just expand a little bit, and I'm kind of curious, um, do those oyster diseases affect people?
no, those aren't the oyster diseases that affect people. You could
Okay.
have dermo all throughout an oyster and it would not cause any issue. Um, These are these are pressures. Like if you're talking about crop management, these are all different pressures on the oyster itself. But there's no danger to humans through dermo or MSX.
Okay, so that leads to my next question, of course, because I had a bunch of events cancel. I saw a decrease in like my pop-up people coming out when the news came out about the Vibrio.
And
Um,
that's
did that affect you any?
maybe it did. Now that you mention it, like it seems almost like clockwork. Every year I think there's just this maybe this gets me in trouble saying this, but like I was like, there's some George Soros type person out there like funding like Vibrio stories about oysters. Because all right, let me put it this way. It's terrible to ever have anybody get sick. We take it very seriously. You know, we had a out of millions of oysters, if one person gets sick, we have the Maryland Department of Health, we have the FDA. Like they come through, they crawl through all of our paperwork, our processes, everything. So I just want to say like it hurts when you find out that maybe somebody got sick off of your food product. It is very rare. We as humans, I think, take it's like the whole idea of like a driving your car or a plane. It is so much safer to fly a plane than it is to drive a car. But because we're in a car every single day, we just don't really think about how dangerous it is. And it's the same thing with oysters. I think it's you hear flesh-eating bacteria and you're like, oh man, like, am I gonna like lose my arm? Not and again, I don't want to get too deep into this stuff because then there's always somebody that's going to say you were wrong about this, but whatever. But there's a danger to us as oyster farmers too, with that same disease. There's two variants of it. The one that gets you sick gastrointestinally, and then there's the flesh eating side of it, where if you have a cut or a scratch or anything like that on your arm, your leg, and that gets in there and you don't take care of it right away, it you know there are people that end up losing their arms, their legs. It has happened, but that's, you know, I'm very serious about like our staff. If they have a cut, they have something, it's like, hey, clean that. I got neosporin, I got alcohol, hydrogen peroxide, like clean that all the time. Change your gloves, wear gloves. We take it very seriously, even as rare as it is. It needs to always be taken very seriously to keep it at the level of rarity that it is. With that being said, it's clickbait, you know. Everybody loves a lot of people love oysters, and you put out there on a news article, they're gonna keep doing it every year because every time they put it out, that's people are clicking on that. And they know they're like, it's I don't know, it's just the nature of people, it's the nature of the business.
I think that next year I'm gonna put out an article about Vibrio and get some clicks. Maybe it'll come to this podcast and we'll run the numbers up on this podcast. Everybody's doing it, so it's got to be okay.
Yeah, it's gonna happen every year. It's just the nature, unfortunately, this is life. Things do happen. People pass away due to, unforeseen circumstances all the time, but that doesn't mean we don't continue living our lives out of fear. Um, so oysters are very safe. I had a quote, oysters are safer than cantaloupe. So let's put it that way. But nobody's kicking on a man dies of cantaloupe poisoning.
Maybe that should be the article next year. We got to switch the game
Yeah.
up. Get the
What's
eyes
more,
off of the oysters.
then we got the cantaloupe
So as
industry
far,
coming after us.
I mean, nobody in the oyster industry is going after those raiders.
Yeah.
Think about it
There's
now.
a
Think about it.
So they are safe. They're in the summer. And look, if somebody's not comfortable eating, like nobody's forcing you to eat it.
For some reason, my videos turn a lot more wheels on Facebook, and comments go crazy. And it's always somebody in the comments saying, "Oh, yeah, I'm not gonna eat those." Okay, nobody's twisting your arm. Are you serious? You took time to look at this video, comment on this video negatively, give your unsolicited opinion. This is an Oyster page. Why are you even on the page?
I think it's, what do they call it? Rage bait?
I don't know, but they got me. They
Well,
got me.
it's my favorite is when people come up at like the festivals and they're like, mm-mm, they taste like boogers. And I my first thing back is, how do you know what that tastes like? And it gets them and they laugh. Like I've seen all bits of like
Gotcha.
people. Some lady came up one time and saw them. She looked over the raw bar. She's like, "Those are disgusting." I'm like, "All right, cool." When you get started, it sucks. You don't want somebody coming up out of nowhere and talking to you like that. But I've learned to just either lean back into it and mess with them if they look like they can take a joke, make some fun out of it, or just let it roll off your shoulder. Um,
Yeah, my probably my biggest pet peeve, shucking oysters. I don't know if I've said this anywhere else. Um, and right now it's on the tip of my tongue, like it's right there. Like, so the issue is, you get a group of friends that love oysters. There's probably one or two in the group that haven't ate oysters. The first thing these friends who eat oysters say is, "Oh, just swallow it." What? And then when I try to educate them about really eating oysters, they looking at me funny. I'm like, I'm here to help you. You're eating the oyster wrong. You cannot just swallow an oyster. Okay, I'm off my pedestal. I'm off my pedestal. Let's get back to Dan.
well, no, no, you gotta like chew it a little bit, and that's another one is when people come up, I'm like, is it? I ask them, I said, is it a texture thing? Because if it's a texture thing, I understand that it's hard, like you know certain medications, are hard to swallow because it's just a texture thing. You know, People think I'm a psycho because I'm that guy that like I'll just take a pill and just swallow it like no problem. But I'm also the person that I walk up and I see a food I've never seen before. I don't even really ask any questions. I'm like, yeah, I'll try it. Let's see what it does. See how it tastes.
Yeah, I tried some of those ants at Salt Lime at Oyster
Ants?
Wars. Yeah, they had ants. Um and I guess they were, I'm guessing, smoked or something. I don't even know. But it was just like something to do. I was like, and I grabbed a big handful, not a big hand or a big spoonful. And everybody was around me like, no, 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 not that many. I'm like, well, if you're gonna eat one, I mean, you've already got it in your mouth, so you just go ahead and get it over with. And I'm thinking, an ant, how much flavor can I get out of one little small ant? So I was like, well, let me get a bunch so I can actually taste. And but anyway, it was just like, it's like similar to eating a pea crab or oyster crab. It's up. These were crunchy, but like just like take it back, like chew it, taste it. It's over with.
Oh,
Nothing lasts forever.
I'm glad you brought up the pea crab because that creates some
Let's talk
fun.
about it. Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
I mean, you got everything from like they bring the. I'll tell you a story. So this was about 2 years ago, and these festivals, you're towards the end, like you got 4 or 5 beers that are typically brought to you by festival goers. That's a great part of this job is everybody wants to seem to bring the oyster shucker a beer, um, and we will accept beer all the time. But we're feeling good. There's music. The sun's out. We're through the rush. Everything's. This lady comes up and she's got an oyster with a pea crab on there and just presents it to me and doesn't say anything. And I was like, "Oh, pea crab," and I grab it and just eat it. And maybe that wasn't the right move because she looked at me like, I mean, she was ready to like, she was like, oh, like that. I can't believe you just did that. I'm like, oh no, they're cool. Like I was like, you can eat them. They're safe. They just get in the oyster, all that. She's still looking at me like, no, I don't trust you, all that. And she didn't say it. Eventually I looked at her, I said, do you want your money back? And she's like, yeah. And I just handed her money back. But they get in the oyster. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you typically find a pea crab in a really nice oyster. Like, and it's you'll see them when you shuck them open. They're kind of always in the same little spot. You identify it and you try to flick it out, so it doesn't surprise people. But,
I'm not flicking nothing out. I'm not
you leave it
flicking
in
nothing
there.
out. I'm leaving it in there. If anything, I'm gonna pull that gill back so they can see it as soon as they get it. Um,
Yeah.
or sometimes I'll leave it hidden. Um, because people don't know they're not really paying attention to these oysters. We have a very um particular eye for shell, for dirt, for grit, for anything that's not supposed to be in there. That's why we
Hmm.
can see these pea crabs. We can see those pearls that most people can't see. They only feel it when they chomp down on it, if it's missed by a shucker. Um, but we have a very particular eye that I love. Like it's like when I'm cleaning up an oyster, people really look at me and always like, "Oh, I didn't even see that." Well, yeah, I'm like, that's my job. That's what I do. I want you to have the best experience when you're eating this oyster. So, I get it. But as far as the pea crab, like I had this one experience with this lady where she brought back the oyster and the pea crab and was like, and she had this look of disgust on her face. And it was almost like she brought it back to me like to ruin my day. Like, look at this. How dare you?
No, and that's the fun part. So selling as we sell more and more oysters and you get more or less feedback um from chefs, from buyers, the hardest thing for us as farmers is, you know, we really can see the shell on the outside, but if it sounds like it's full, we don't know how much dirt is in there, how much grit is there. They're called blisters, that hold little pockets of dirt and mud, and you shuck them and you hit it, you break it open, and it kind of ruins the oyster. And we don't want that to happen. And how that happens, why that happens, what you do to fix it, it's hard for us to. I try to take everybody's feedback, but when you look at a million oysters and I get a picture of one oyster, I always ask, how did the whole bag feel? So it's like, I think, especially as us who shuck a lot, I'll take my own oysters to events, as you know, and I'll shuck through the bag because I want to get the shucker's perspective of the bag, not, I did six and one just happened to be bad. It's like when you start getting to like 10, 12, 15 that you can't sell out of that bag, you start asking questions. We've tried to like, I always try to throw like four extra maybe in a bag or two or three extra. Um, so just in case, like if that does happen, it's like, hey, there was already a couple extra built in there, and hopefully you didn't lose money on that bag because that's where chefs get upset if they can't sell that oyster. They're missing out on that $3 in revenue for every one that they throw away.
That's a good point. So as an oyster farmer, what are your selling points to chefs and to restaurants and distributors as far as your oysters?
I think you really got to nail the specs. It's the grading. So we have our salt buoy oyster, and that is a cocktail oyster. Like, I get all the time. Well, when are the oysters going to get bigger? Well, you can't have bigger oysters if you're selling the small ones. You gotta hold them out longer. Those bigger oysters might be 5, 6, 7 months older than that cocktail size oyster. It's not like we're sitting there with a cookie cutter and just saying, hey, this is it. If we pull out, say I need to get 1,000 oysters out, I might have to pull 5,000 oysters. and sort through 5,000 oysters to get 1,000 of those cocktail oysters. Now we have mechanical graders, but they're not perfect. You still need the human eye a little bit to sit there and pick them out. And you know, the guys that work for me do a great job of calling, but you got to sit there and watch it. I actually call them uh can I cuss on here or I call them what the fucks. So what I try to eliminate in a bag is I call it a what the fuck. And what that is a chef pulls it out of the bag and goes, "What the fuck?" I don't want those in the bags. So I think it's more eliminating that chef going, what are you selling me here? Like I'm not paying, 60, 70, 80 cents for this.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Um, no, that's a great and I've shut your oysters and I always give you compliments. I give you compliments, but I also told you when they was not so good also. But it's been a while and you've this is what I love about you and the Salt Boys and your brand. You care. You care. And when people care about the product they're pushing out, man, it's the it's just endless where you can go. I can tell, from the time you started till now, and it's just it's an entirely different oyster. Also, by the way, I'm not sure if that's farming practices. I'm not sure if that's learning. I'm not sure what that is, but and I'm not questioning it because it's working.
Well,
I'm Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say that's what you're referring to is the shell morphology, and that is farming practices. So there's there's an art I'm learning to over 2 years. Say it takes 2 years to get that oyster up to size. You can get them from 10 millimeters or a quarter of an inch. You can get them up to 2 inches. And if you can get them up to 2 inches, looking good and healthy, and that's always going to be the oldest part of the shell. So that 2 inch oyster, that first 2 inches, that has the most likelihood of getting what we call shell rot, where you get all the sponge in there, and then you go to shuck it through the hinge, and it blows out on you. You can start to get rid of that. So we have desiccation cycles where you leave them out in the air. They're intertidal species. They can survive out of the water longer than most fish, actually, way longer than fish, a week, 2 weeks longer than crabs. If you keep an oyster cold, it can live out of the water for, people don't like to hear this, but months. In the wintertime, you could take it out in January and put it back in March. And that oyster, if you kept it cold and moist, that oyster could still be alive, but they've survived on that intertidal range. So I almost looked at it as a farmer was to recreate the things that over millions of years made them what they are. So it's like get them out of the water, let them get some oxygen in that shell. That'll harden up that shell. We also have the this really helps us. We have a bottom lease and we have a floating lease. So if the oyster's growing too fast and it's got a thin shell, I learned to kind of you tumble it or you put it up in the floats and it'll harden the shell up. If I need to get growth on it for us, I'll put them into bottom cages because it without floating around and banging into each other, you get that nice bill growth. It actually doesn't add any meat. It just looks better on a plate. So if I want to get more bill growth, I put them there. And coming up with a strategy, it's almost not a strategy as it is like as a farmer, you really got to pick them up and hold them in your hand and say, what's the next stage? What's the next step for this oyster? And we'll get a run. I call them runs because you think of like mowing your lawn. You're not jumping to the middle of your lawn and start cutting there and then jump into the other side of your lawn and then cut over there. You're really going in lines and going back and forth, and that's what we do when we're looking for a harvest. Um, I'll see a really good run come through. I think at one point this summer they were amazing. Just everything like that was coming out of there was 3.25, 3.5 inches, hard shell, no shell rot, pretty, no seaweed growing on it, just perfect oysters. And excuse me, what I learned happens is everybody sees them and they start going nuts on them, and your sales start skyrocketing. Well, this is a limited supply. You know, a million sounds like a lot, but that's a million over everything from 10 millimeters up to 3.5 inches. And you want to get the biggest run of those good oysters. And say you only got 10,000 or 12,000 of them. If I had more time, I could get more up there, but you got to make money and you got to fulfill purchase orders. And, you'll start to see it with farms where the stuff looks good. And then all of a sudden it starts getting smaller. You start seeing like maybe not as good looking oysters in there. And that's like a rushing technique. So, you're kind of rushing through your farm. And for us as farmers, we have to manage that stock. Like right now, I'm in a weird spot between the two leases where I'm leaving one whole section alone. I'm doing everything I can to just stay away from a section, even though it's like a piggy bank, like I'm just staying away from the piggy bank because we're ending our growing season. If I just run through all those right now and I don't focus on growing this last little bit of stuff in my floating lease, come February, I could be in a position where I just don't have anything to sell. Um, and then you're going through all sorts of other things. You got to
So you got
go
to
to other
kind of prep
harvesters.
yourself so have some ready to you have some ready to sell, and then you got to prep the ones that will be ready once you, I guess, get done those that are ready. So wow,
Yeah,
that's man,
it's
science.
yeah, it's time and pressure and weather and all sorts of factors. And it really just comes down to probabilities. Like if I know I have 200 cages with 1,000 oysters a piece in them and I get a 50% yield, I know how much I can run through and get that. And then there's also a level of we're forming more co-ops as farmers, and you hope that every farmer cares as much as you do. Our salt buoy is like our flagship oyster. That should always be our nicest oyster that comes out of there. But that doesn't mean we should throw away other products that we can harvest or we can get. Um, you just put a different name on it and maybe a lower price, because you understand the spec of that oyster. Um, say I'm selling a ton, but my neighbor isn't selling that many, but we're kind of the same area. We can harvest that. And it's like I can try to help him move his product so he can, you know, make money and move stuff. Because then there's other times where maybe they're moving more stuff and I'm not moving so much and I need to make money. We can work off each other. So there's even a little bit of trading going on amongst local harvesters, and whether people want to hear that or not, I mean, it's just the truth. Um,
What advice? Because I kind of feel like this podcast could go to the experience, geared towards the experienced farmer, oyster farmer, or a beginner that's wanting to get into it. Like, what advice would you give to a new farmer that has already started a farm, but they're in those beginning stages where they just can't seem to get anything right?
just it's gonna be tough, and you just gotta work every day. Just do as like set yourself a schedule. Don't work out there for 14 hours. Pick a time based on your tides or your weather patterns and say, I'm just gonna go out there and work. I call it the run game, where it's like just put your head down and just grab 12 bags out of your floats and just process them. See what you get out of it. You get that done, grab another 12 bags, process it. And you have to do that every day for months. And it might not feel like you're doing anything, but when you look back at it, that's honestly the best way I think to farm is just kind of put your head down and just process your stuff, just organize and clean it. Because the work's never going to end. It's just not. You got to find enjoyment in the actual work. If you don't find little enjoyment in doing it, there's no way you can last in this business. So, like when I sit there, when I was working by myself for a couple years, I would go down there on Sundays and I'd put the Eagles game on and I'd sit there and just count and sort oysters watching the Eagles game, sitting on the dock in October, still like great weather, just watching the Eagles game, sorting oysters. And then I would get my orders out on Monday. Um, just you just got to work it. And that's the cool thing about this is the input is work. It really is. And
What
like I
does
said, you
the
gotta enjoy it.
what does the restock look like? Is that a hard process of, I guess, reseeding your farm or starting the process for the season, or what does that look like?
So we right around April, May, you start thinking about seeding your farm. But think of it as like you're tossing things into a pipeline. Because after about 2 years, you can try to keep your plantings separate, but if you're processing 1 million oysters, it gets so mixed in all the different plantings. They all grow at different rates. Think of 1 million grains of sand that are all going to become 3 inches one day. So something that's the size of a softball is going to fill up 50 dump trucks. And you got to manage that. And every piece of little particle is going to grow at a different rate. And that's a lot of volume expansion. That's probably the wildest part about seeding your farm is, your small stuff doesn't take up that much space on the farm. You could fit maybe 2 million oysters inside of an acre, but at full size, maybe you're only fitting 50,000 over 50 cages. It's cool, it's nonstop, and that's really where it comes into like get more seed than you think you can handle because you can over process your farm. Like you don't want to hit the seed too much. You want to find a balance of letting it grow, going out there, touching it, but not leaving it so long that it grows crazy and it starts going off in all different directions. Which I found it's right around 2 months or 10 weeks is kind of the sweet spot of leaving them alone. Just, you know, take the training wheels off, let them figure it out on their own, but go back in and check on them. But yeah, throughout the year, we'll buy from different. Sometimes we'll get a neighboring farm that got too much seed and they don't have any more space. They run out of gear. Hey, I got 100,000. Do you want to buy them? Sure. They, bring them over to you. Or you go to the hatcheries, you get the smaller stuff, and it's expensive, but you got to buy. If you want to sell 500,000 oysters in a year, you should probably plant well over 1 million. And 1 million's a big number. It it's a lot. Like just try to count to 1 million. See how long it takes you.
You've done some pretty cool events. I saw you at Westminster Oyster Stroll. We did the Ocean City Seafood Festival, St. Mary's, National Oyster Festival. You've done some cool ones. You're also doing the Ravens Tailgate. Um, what keeps you going, man? You're working on the farm. You're doing these events. You're selling in restaurants. You're moving. You're grooving. You're shucking. You're jiving. How the heck? Like what keeps you going, man?
Um, Sometimes I wonder that myself. It I love doing it. I guess that's really what it is. As tired as I get, um, as much strain as it puts on my body. I feel, this is it's just what I'm supposed to be doing, like a duck in water. It's you know just kind of what I do. Um, you mentioned the Ravens tailgate. I had to get up at three something, 4 in the morning, and drive up there and get everything set up by 7 a.m. on like very little sleep. But then when you're in that atmosphere, we were at by the way, we're at Game Day Firehouse. It's right by the stadium, and we're gonna start doing that every home game. Um, People get excited. It's like you're the best part of their day. And the farm can wear you down, but then growing something and handing it to somebody and saying, I've I've handled this product through the whole stage and here I am handing it to you. And, you know, maybe it's somebody's first oyster or their 100,000th oyster. They're always excited. Maybe it's the people that keep me going because you got the naysayers and whatever, they don't bother me all that much, but it's the friends that I've made through this. Seeing you guys, like you said, like seeing you at these different festivals, hanging out and trading stories and maybe going to a restaurant afterwards. So just kind of interacting with people, seeing it. It's an interesting life. Like you really don't know where it's gonna take you. Um, so what keeps me going? I don't know. I got this one motivational app that every day at 3 o'clock it gives me like a motivational quote. Um, and it's got some cool videos, like stuff from like Michael Jordan and like successful people like Kobe Bryant. He like I don't know if you've ever heard Kobe Bryant like motivation stuff, but he'll get you if you feel like you don't want to go to work, he'll get you motivated.
Oh, I wanted to thank you personally on the podcast. Um, so if not the last episode, but the previous episode, I'm not sure where this episode is going to drop, but I wanted to thank you for your donation for the shuck team. Group of oyster shuckers. We were traveling to Prince Edward Island. You contributed to the cause. Why?
I couldn't be there and I wanted to be a part of it. And I think it's awesome, that whole Shuck Team USA idea. And I just wanted to support it, um, monetarily because the hotels, travel, all that stuff, it costs money. We shouldn't tell people this, but I think a lot of us would do it for free, but we don't want to, like we just enjoy doing it. So yeah, I just wanted to be a part of it and support you guys. And it was cool to see you guys go up there and compete and represent, the US. And I think I saw it as the start of something bigger too.
Again, I want to thank you for that, man. Um, and I guess lastly, any last thoughts? Like, where do you want to see your farm in the next 2 or 3 years? I'm not gonna go to the 5 year, 10 year, but like just the 2, 3 year, which is not, too far, but it's not tomorrow either.
I mean, we would love to see our oysters in the Midwest, down south, out west, really break out of this mid-Atlantic region and get them all over, especially to people that want oysters but maybe don't have access to them. And I think the Midwest is, definitely a place that probably craves seafood a little bit. So I'd like to see us into those outside markets a little bit more.
So
Um,
to just elaborate a little bit more, what are the first two steps in making that happen?
it's logistics. Being an oyster farmer, it's the truck drivers, man. Like uh, our Addison, who works, I gotta shout out to him. Like without him putting that, like I put it on his truck, it goes up to Baltimore. Without him doing his job every day and driving that stuff up there, we wouldn't have a business. Um, so yeah, getting on CCAP, getting on Tidewater, those truck drivers are crucial to this industry because without them, I mean, we're putting stuff on Tuesday night and it's getting into restaurants by Wednesday afternoon. and that's no easy feat. So it's the logistics, and then I think just educating people, teaching them, I found this crazy to me, not crazy, but somebody said you should put a best buy date on your bags of oysters, and I put a best buy date. I think it's a good idea.
Where can the people find your oysters? How can they get in contact with you for events and other things? Anything else you want to put out there for you for the listening audience?
So our website, fallenpineoyster.com, they can go on that page, and there's a box to contact us, and that goes to our whole team. So we respond pretty quickly. If you're local to the Ocean City or Berlin, you're coming down the ocean. I live right outside Ocean City, and I like saying I'll sell you 100 oysters or 10,000 oysters. So if you get a hold of me and I can get you some oysters, I'll get them locally. And then if you're in the Baltimore area, in Elk Ridge, you can pick up salt buoys at JJ McDonnell. Um, we do move some salty wild oysters through a couple people in Baltimore, but yeah, we'll make it work. We'll figure out how to get them to you as fresh as possible. And then we want to build out that website and advertise more where we're going to be at. The two next big ones are Oi Fest in Baltimore at Union Craft Brewing. That's with Nick and Jen from the local Oyster, and there'll be a couple good farms up there, and some good beer, music, and the oyster eating competition. That's always fun to watch. And then we'll be at Fager's the 8th and the 15th for their shell shocked events. Um, and those are a lot of fun too.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much for your time, your patience. I'm glad we got you back on the podcast. So much has changed since the first episode. If you haven't listened to the first episode, you can check it out on the Oyster Ninja podcast on all streaming platforms. And again, man, thank you so much. I'm enjoying looking at your process and your journey, and it's just crazy to see the things that you're doing. And that's one thing we didn't talk about, and maybe we'll say that for another episode. But you're doing a lot in front of the camera and behind the scenes and behind the scenes, far as like with government officials and all of that other stuff that we didn't even get into. But thank you. And one of those things where somebody's got to do it, and you're doing it, man. So I'm proud of you, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I like keeping that kind of stuff behind. Like, I mean, you can see it's all public, but
Right,
I
right.
don't want to. It's a long, slow process, and you just gotta. If you want to make impactful change, you just can't ever give up. You just gotta keep like, don't be demanding, but like demand change. You know, if that makes sense. It's just keep focused. Staying focused over oyster farming teaches you how to stay focused on one thing for 2 years. Not a lot of people. I have ADD worse than anybody, but I can stay focused on something for 2 years, and that's learned through oyster farming. So if you really want to make a change, it's like you gotta, if something means something to you now, it's got to mean the same thing to you 2 years from now.
Damn, that's where we'll end it. Peace.
All right.